Today I want to talk about game design again. Now you might have seen some of my past videos where I talk about the difference between game feel and game balance. I'm more passionate about game feel. Game balance is one of those things that can always be adjusted later, but game feel is the most important part. Game feel is how it feels to move around the world, how it feels to press the buttons and use your abilities. One of the reasons why I've always loved Psylocke is she moves very flowy. Her entire movement feels very rewarding to do. All of her abilities are very satisfying to use. From the way that she shoots, the way that she dashes, and even the way that she invis. The only one that I've always disliked is her ultimate. Because while her ultimate is cool, there's not really anything that I'm doing. I just press the button and then the game plays itself. There's not a whole lot of interactivity on my end or a lot of choice on my end, which is why I've always loved Psylocke's neutral kit more than her ultimate, which is why it's extremely disappointing to me that they took power away from her neutral kit and then shifted it into her ultimate. This wasn't only bad for Psylocke players, but it also was bad for the people who played against Psylocke. It's not fun or interesting to go up against. Her ultimate before had pros and cons, and there were clear and obvious ways that you could counter it. And now I'll end up getting a lot of kills, even accidentally, that I didn't intend for. Another downside to Psylocke's power being taken away from her neutral and put into her ultimate is her neutral is where she had the most control. Her shurikens and left click were still things that you had to aim.
What a disgrace.
And the ultimate, although powerful, is something that you lose control over the moment that you press the button.
And so your story ends. Double kill!
So not only does the change limit in the ways that you can play Psylocke, it also makes it so now kills have to be determined somewhat by luck. As every Psylocke player can tell you, there are times you get enemies within that circle and she just doesn't target them. And there's other times she'll target a high priority target twice. I love Psylocke's base kit. Her neutral kit is amazing, but I would absolutely be down for them to rework her ultimate. Something like Magic's, where I have more control, but there's also risk with it. In a situation like this, yeah, they made Psylocke powerful, but at the cost of making her less fun. Because just because something is powerful doesn't mean it's always fun. And before, with her having a more powerful neutral, it meant that I had a choice. I didn't have to farm ult and try and go straight for that. I could use her neutral kit in a unique and interesting way to try and get some very sneaky assassin kills. By shifting power into her ultimate and taking away from the neutral, it just made more sense a lot of times to try and farm your ultimate as fast as possible. That's less fun for me and less fun for the people playing against me. Now, other examples of what game feel is could be something like Hela. Her bird is one of the worst abilities in the game in my opinion. It feels clunky to use. It takes a lot of control away from you and sometimes does some very wonky things. This is one of those abilities where no matter how you change the cooldown or no matter what you change on it, like it giving you a passive shield or something, it will never feel good to press that button. And no matter what, every time I'm playing Hela, every time I hit shift, I hate it. At the same time, there's some heroes that are very well designed, like Magic. Magic's kit is one of the best designed in the game because it's so fun to use. Her portal feels really good. Her uppercut is super satisfying. And a good example of the way they've changed a kit to add better feel is her right click being able to pierce through enemies. It was a small adjustment that felt really cool and fun to use in game, especially when you would hear multiple hit markers. Something like that is a great change, and then being able to balance it means adjusting how much damage or how much power each one of those pierce shots would do. Magic's ultimate is another well-designed ability where it's more powerful, but there are also clear weaknesses to it and clear counterplay. It also still provides a lot of choice on behalf of the Magic player. Another example where game feel is important is making sure it doesn't feel clunky to use. Penny is notorious for her web breaks. Things like that make a character not feel fun to play. Ways to make something feel good is a lot of times based off of speed and if it works the way that you think it should function. The web breaks breaking really breaks the illusion of you playing Penny. It's a common bug that really separates you and reminds you that you're playing a video game. Speed is another way that makes something feel good or bad. This isn't to say that fast things feel good and slow things feel bad. Magic, for instance, has a very slow sword swing, but because it's slower, it feels more powerful for her to use it. It feels like there's weight behind every sword slash. At the same time, Spidey, for instance, being able to swing really fast through the air feels really good to do. It feels very rewarding. It feels like you are Spider-Man. It feels like you are light. You do feel very acrobatic as you're going through the air as Spider-Man. I bring all this up because Rocket recently went through some changes that changed the way his kit worked, not just in terms of whether or not it was for balance, but how the character felt to play. In a previous patch, for some reason, Rocket's res beacons was buffed from being 45 seconds down to 40. Something at the time I disagreed with because Rocket's res beacon is already incredibly powerful. Being able to bring back or revive someone from the dead is a huge advantage in this game. But what I really don't like is that's the most passive part of Rocket's kit. It's the least interesting part of his kit. So if you wanted to make Rocket stronger, that would not be the way to do it. Right after buffing the res in the very next patch though, they nerfed Rocket's movement up on the wall crawl. The wall crawl already was a very underutilized part of his kit, but it was a very powerful part of his kit, and you could tell the difference between a good rocket and a bad rocket based off of how well they could wall crawl and use that to their advantage. But even with the way it was before at 10 meters per second, I would still barely get myself out of certain situations. But at least it gave me choice. It gave me the option to take more risks because of the fact that I knew I at least could use my wall crawl in an emergency. It also made his kit very interesting because of the fact that his kit is already really limited. They already nerfed the dashes, which then incentivized you to use the wall dashes more, which I was fine with. But Rocket's kit is incredibly simple in comparison to new heroes that come out like Gambit. Gambit's kit is incredibly overloaded with choice. There's so many options that he has, and this is not a bad thing. I think that Gambit is a lot of fun and it makes you really think about how you want to use that character. But Rocket already had a limited part of his kit. He was already seen as a heal bot that was only supposed to sit back and right click. And by taking away his ability to wall crawl, you've turned him into literally just that. He no longer has the option to play aggressive and use the advantage of that wall crawl. So you've taken away one of his main tools and buffed the most passive part of his kit with the res beacon. So now you've turned Rocket into the same thing that you did with Psylocke. You took away the fun of the neutral and you've turned them into ult bots, where your whole goal is just to farm ult as fast as possible and then use it. The big problem with buffing passive parts of characters' kit is that they get a lot of value without a lot of work. The res beacon, like I said, is an incredibly powerful part of Rocket's kit, but it is basically a leave it and forget it. The skill expression for Rocket's res beacon is basically just his creative spots and where he can put it, and sometimes using it as a distraction. But for the most part, it's not an ability you really get to use all that often, or an ability that you interact with. Meanwhile, the movement in these games and the positioning you have in these games is everything. By nerfing Rocket's movement, you took away what little skill expression that he had. I'll be the first to admit that in the right hands, Rocket was incredibly powerful, probably a little too powerful the way he was before. But if you wanted to nerf Rocket, the solutions were pretty simple. You can nerf the res beacon, which is, like I said, a powerful part of his kit that's incredibly passive and not a very interesting one in the first place, or you could nerf the range of his heals. If the problem was Rocket was surviving too much, there are ways through design to incentivize the player to get in much closer. You can leave Rocket's mobility the way that it was, but you could say the orbs start to decrease in size the farther that they travel. So that way there could always be a certain range in which Rocket would always want to play. And the farther away that you got, the less value that he got from healing. This could encourage players to get in closer, but also still use the wall crawl to their advantage. And with the way that Rocket is currently designed, the absolute best way to play him is to sit as far away as possible, shooting your heals. You actually have less incentivization to even get in close in the first place, because the odds of you surviving a Daredevil dive, a Spider-Man dive, or any of the many heroes that can close the gap on you are much, much lower. Players are always going to try and find the most optimal way to play. So you want to make sure that when you're designing a hero, you're designing them in a way that the most optimal way to play is the most fun way to play, but at the same time is also the most fun to play against as well. Developers have a tendency to patch out what's fun instead of what makes things powerful. I still believe that Rocket's kit at its core is actually a pretty well designed kit, both in terms of its ability to be fun and fun to play against. However, the problem is it's just not implemented in the right way. And unfortunately, with the way that Rocket's implemented right now, it's the absolute worst version of his kit. If they truly wanted to fix Rocket, both in terms of his strength, but also toning down some of the power that he has, they would revert the wall crawl nerf, they would nerf the res beacon, and they would change his orbs so that way they decrease in size the farther that they travel, so they provide less healing. This would disincentivize players from sitting back and holding right click and give players more of a reason to wall crawl. It's more action for the Rocket, it's more skill expression on his side, and there's more for the enemy team to interact with. And that's a win for everyone. I say all this because of the fact that I've been playing PvP games for a really long time. I played Team Fortress 2, I played League of Legends, I played Overwatch for 8 years. And the thing about playing each and every one of those games is I didn't stop because I got bored of them. I stopped because eventually they changed the heroes that I played so much that it no longer felt fun to play. It didn't matter whether or not the heroes were powerful or had a high win rate, all I cared about was whether or not it was fun. Because much like Rocket in this instance, I might still be able to get value winning with him if all I did was just sit back and right click and ult, but that wasn't what made him fun for me. Being able to have a neutral in which I could take advantage of the wall crawl meant everything to me in playing Rocket. Making the neutral all that time building up to the ultimate fun is important because that's what you're going to spend 98% of your time doing. I don't want a game built around ultimates because the ultimates only last for about 10 seconds after charging them up for a minute and a half. I don't want only that 10 seconds to be fun, I want the minute and a half leading up to it to be enjoyable. Now, I have no problem with nerfing my heroes if they're too powerful, that's fine. But I think it's important that we remember that we should be nerfing the power and not the fun. Nerf the strength, but not the feel. Because the way it is right now, even though Rocket and Psylocke are still both very powerful, they are, to me, less enjoyable and less fun to play. Psylocke I can still enjoy a little bit, but I have to be honest, I absolutely dread playing Rocket now. He's just no longer as fun as he used to be, and that really disappoints me. And I worry that NetEase is going to continue to keep erasing the fun from a lot of these heroes. I'm worried that they're going to turn this game into an ultimate farm simulator rather than focus on the fun parts of the game, which is the neutral. Because yes, ultimates can be important, but what's more fun is using your abilities in unique ways to feel like you outplayed your opponent. Whether it be using your wall crawl in order to try and get away from an enemy, or using a portal to dodge attacks so that way you can get the upper hand on your opponent. or using stealth to sneak in and get the drop on an enemy and getting the kill. Marvel Rivals already has a lot of really fantastic things in the neutral that make their game fun, that makes it feel like you can outplay your opponent in front of you. Just currently the way things are going now, I worry that that's not going to be the direction that we go. And I worry in their attempts to try and find something that's more balanced, they ultimately make the game less fun. And going forward, they have to be very careful in how they tweak the numbers on a lot of these things. Because something that's fun isn't necessarily OP, and something that's OP isn't necessarily fun. Part of me is disappointed with how fast Psylocke and Rocket have already been changed, and how different they feel from when I first played them. Because it does kind of bum me out that the characters I love the most are less and less fun than they were when I first started playing. However, I am hoping that maybe NetEase takes notice of this, and maybe they see people are frustrated or upset by the changes, and they're quick to revert them as well. Because I really do love Marvel Rivals, and I love a lot of the heroes that I play, and I love a lot of the new heroes that they come out with. But much like the PvP games in the past, I didn't stop playing them because I didn't want to anymore. I stopped playing them because eventually they just patched out my fun, and that's what I worry that might happen with Rivals as well. I'm afraid in them attempting to try and find some sort of perfect balance, they end up making the game feel clunkier to play. Because the character's win rate is not the full story. And at the end of the day, if the player sitting down doesn't feel like pressing the buttons is enjoyable, they're not going to want to keep playing. Anyway, I wanted to bring this up as sort of a discussion because this is what I've noticed with the characters that I play. I've not played all the other characters since launch. I know a lot of them have gone through changes, so I'm kind of curious of what other people have seen as well. And I don't mean just in terms of power, whether or not the hero you play is weaker or stronger, but whether or not something feels clunkier or whether or not something feels better. If you've been playing for a long time and your hero feels better, can you tell me which changes they've made that have been positive? And if you've been playing for a long time and there's a hero you gave up because it no longer feels good to play, can you tell me which hero it was and why? I'd be very interested to know from other people's perspectives as well. I am really disappointed that I don't feel like I'll ever play Rocket after this. There's lots of heroes in Marvel Rivals and I'm still enjoying playing the game, but I will say it does feel really disappointing that I just don't feel like playing Rocket anymore. And I know it's not been long, but I already miss playing. Anyway, there's lots of Marvel Rivals heroes that I'm still enjoying playing. I still enjoy Psylocke, I still enjoy Rogue and Cap. I'm still enjoying a lot of the new heroes they come out with, but I will say that it is disappointing still to end up feeling like you end up losing a hero. And I do hope that one day I want to play Rocket again. Anyway, that's all I got. If you have any stories about the heroes that you've been playing and how they've changed over the year, please leave them in the comments below, because I'd be really curious to see if taking power away from the neutral is a common thing, or if it might have just been a few off cases here with Psylocke and Rocket. So yeah, let me know in the comments below.